So I want to do just a very quick review to help us get along. We said that this parak is going to deal primarily with the topic of muktzah, right? And suggested that the Koren Steinsaltz explanation, good morning, was such that there were three varieties or three kinds of situations that one would have something, an object, considered muktzah, set aside. One was that the person had mentally set it aside not to use on Shabbat. That's simple. The second example was that it could have been something that because a question of its use. Okay. And the third, also somewhat from its use, but more in terms of financial loss. That it was an item that was a particular instrument, important that it not get ruined or things like that, and therefore it was set aside. So given those varieties now, we're going to pick up on 123 actually, A. Okay, we're about a third down the Amud. It's sort of near where the Tosafot Paga is starting. Okay, Itmar, it says. Okay, remember we referred to the question of using a hammer to chop or to break nuts. And it was the question of the variety. So it says, Itmar, it was said, Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar, Rabbi Yochanan. Said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Kornas shel Zahavim Shaninu. What we were talking about and learning was a special kind of hammer used by goldsmiths. Rav Shimon bar Abba Amar, Kornas shel B'samim Shaninu. And Rav Shimon said, no, it was a specific kind of hammer used for spices. Okay, so again, the Koren had pictures of these two hammers and showed that the head of the hammer, the tip in particular, was a different size than what we'd normally consider what we would call a mallet, okay, or a regular hammer. So the Gemara continues. Man da'amar de b'samim, one who said that we were talking about a hammer for spices, kol shekain hazahavim. All the more so would they say that goldsmiths, okay, man da'amar shel zahavim. But the one who said that we were dealing with a hammer for goldsmiths, about the Pesamim, kapid alayhim, okay? Implying that the hammer for spices, which had a smaller head and it was more delicate and therefore could be more easily ruined, people are stringent about it, the owners, and therefore they would set it aside and make sure that it's not used, and thus it would be considered muktzah on Shabbat. Okay, our new piece from our Mishnah, ve'et akush ve'et acharkar. Okay, this was two items. One was a kind of like a spindle, okay, or a reed used on a loom. And the other is also an item from a loom. Some translate it as a weaver's reed, others as a shuttle. It's that the piece that usually would go across on the loom, in which they would use it to join the warp and the woof. Okay, so Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, so the Gemara now reads, Paga Shetamna Bateven. Let's take an example, he says, of an unripe fig that's hidden in the straw. It's partially buried in the straw. V'charara shetamama begechalim, or a biscuit, a kind of cake that could be partially buried in the coals. Im megula miktsata, if part of it is revealed, part of it is available, mutar letaltala, then it's permissible to remove it. Ve'im la vasur letaltala, and if it's part of it is not visible, okay, it's forbidden to carry it, to take it out. Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai Omer, he says, Tochavin bekush o bekarkar. He says, instead, take this reed or this spindle, which has a point on it, and stab the fig and pull it out that way. V'hein migarot me'alehen. And then the straw or the coals sort of slide off on their own. They shake off on their own. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman, Halacha Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai. The law is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai. In other words, you have to do it with a shinui, and then that would make it permitted. Lememra, to tell us, the Savar Rav Nachman, Tiltul min hatzad, lo shmei titul. Gemara asks, does this come to tell us then that Rav Nachman holds that handling the object, min hatzad, in other words, from a different manner, okay, that lo shmei tiltul, but that would not be considered normal carrying. V'ha'amar Rav Nachman, but didn't Rav Nachman himself say the following? Hai pugla milamala lamata shari. Okay, if it's a situation where you have a radish and the bigger part of the radish, okay, remember how a radish grows with what I'll call the bigger the head, okay, and then it narrows down. So the Gemara is telling us, if it's such that you're pulling it from the top out, down, shari, it's permitted. Memata lamala, but from the bottom up, asur, that's forbidden. What happened? Hadare Nachman, Rav Nachman Mehahi, and Rav Nachman recanted then from what his position was. Okay, a new piece from our Mishnah. We talked about using needles. So a regular sewing needle, it implied, was permissible to use to remove a thorn. And the question then came up also about a larger kind of needle that was sometimes used to sew burlap bags. Okay, that was what I couldn't think of the other day. Okay, so the Gemara picks up. Shalach le Rabba Berei the Rabba the Rav Yosef. So Rabba, the son of Rabba, sent a query to Rav Yosef. Yilamdenu Rabbeinu, may our master teach us the following. Machat shenital charada. If you have a needle and they have removed the eye of the needle, okay, o uktsa, or somehow the point of the needle has been broken off. Mahu, what's the status? In other words, may it be used and handled on Shabbat? Amarli tinituha. He told him, we'd learned this. Machat shalyad litol ba et hakots. A smaller needle used for general sewing by hand. Okay, one can use it, handle it, in order to remove a thorn. V'kima ichpat le lekots bein nikuva ubein l'she'ena nikuva. And what difference does it make to the thorn whether the needle that's used to remove it has an eye or doesn't have an eye? Etive. But the Gemara says we can challenge this with following. Machat shenital charara or uktsa, a needle that has had the eye removed or the point removed, tahora. It is considered in terms of Tumah and Torah no longer a valid utensil, not really usable as a regular utensil, and therefore it's tahora. It doesn't become Tumah. Amar Abai, and so Abai responds, Tuma Ashabat Karamit, you're making some sort of attempted comparison between issues of Tuma and laws of Shabbat. That's what you're raising? Tuma Kli Ma'aseh Ba'inan. With regards to issues of Tuma, we need a utensil by which one can do an act. That's what we need. The Inyan Shabbat, but in regards to Shabbat, Midi Dechaze Ba'inan, something that's simply suitable or fitting is what we need. Vahan Nami Chazia Lemishkala Bakots. And even in terms of Shabbat, we're saying that a needle that doesn't have an eye or doesn't have a clear point is still usable because it can remove a thorn. Amar Rava. And so Rava responds to Abaye. Man de kamotav shapir kamotav. The one who raised the objection, raised a valid objection. Midele inyan tuma lav manahu. Why? Because in regards to issue of tuma, that, we'll call it for the moment, broken needle, okay, is not considered a real utensil. Le'inyan Shabbat, nami lav manahu. Therefore, in regards to Shabbat, we're also not going to consider it a viable utensil. Meitive. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. We'll challenge this line of thinking from a Braita. Machat, bein nekuva, bein she'ena nekuva. Okay, and again, a needle, whether it has an eye or it does not have an eye, mutar l'taltala b'Shabbat. According to the Braita, it's permitted to handle it on Shabbat. V'lo amru nekuba, and they only referred to the issue of the needle having an eye, ela le'inyan tuma bilvad, only for the purpose of clarifying its status vis-a-vis tuma. Now, Tirgama Abaye, Aliba de Rabba, Begome Askina. Excuse me. And Abaye then explained his answer according to the view of Rabba, and that it applied to Gome, to unfinished needles, is what we're talking about. Namely, Zimnin the Mimlach Alayhu, Umashve Lahomana. There are times, he said, where the person might reconsider or be advised and compare it to a utensil. Valhecha denital charara ohukza. But in a situation where he may have removed the eye or the point, Adam zorka leben grutaot. That in that case, usually if they remove it and they don't consider it a valid utensil, they would throw it away into the rubbish or into the metal scrap pile or into junk. Now, a new piece in the Gemara is coming up. Excuse me. Okay. Gemara says as follows. Asube Yanuka, in terms of straightening out the limbs of a child. Rav Nachman Asir, Rav Nachman forbade, Rav Sheshet Shari, Rav Sheshet permitted. Okay, so think of at the moment a newborn, okay, and what do? They usually swaddle it tight right away. Okay, so that swaddling could be considered on Shabbat, if the child was born, an act of adjusting its limbs. And would that not be almost like finishing the work of the birth? And you would be over on makeh b'patesh, for example. So what happens? Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman, Mina amina la ditnan. On what basis, says, do I say that this is, that I teach this, that I rule this way? There's a following, right? Ein osin apiktorizim b'Shabbat. That we say that one cannot make a certain kind of mixture, okay? This is a drug to produce vomiting, afiktazin. It's an emetic, okay, on the Sabbath. They would do this if the child had too much phlegm, and they would cause the child to spit it out. Okay? For Rav Sheshet, and what is Rav Sheshet's view? Hatam lav urche. Okay? There, he says that's not the natural thing to do. Hacha urche. Okay? Right? But straightening the limbs, wrapping the child up, and straightening its limbs as a side event of wrapping the child is a natural thing to do. Amar Rav Sheshet, says Rav Sheshet, Mina Amina La. On what basis do I say this? All right. The Tznan, as it was taught, Machat Shayad Mitolba et HaKotz. Okay, based on a similar idea that the needle could be used to remove the thorn. Okay, in other words, some medicinal benefit may be gained from the act, and so, but it's not done primarily as an act of medicine, as it's done as an act for benefiting or preventing discomfort. Okay, so Rav Nachman Hatam Pakid, and Rav Nachman there, in terms of removing the item, removing the thorn there, he is more stringent. Hacha lo pakid. But in this situation of the child, he is not so stringent. Okay. Right? We could also explain it that right, in another way, but let's stay with that now. Okay, our new Mishnah. Okay, is a short one. Kaneh shel zaitin. You have a utensil. Okay, it's shaped like a reed. Okay, in other words, like think of a straw, and at the end of the straw, there is I guess what I would call a small bulb, a small area. I'm thinking sometimes if you've done or learned chemistry, you know they had tubes and then open bulb, like open area on the top of the tube. Okay, so they would put this reed into the olives to see if it's what the status of the olives were in terms of the olive oil. Okay, so Kaneh shel zaitin, im yesh kesher birosho, if it has this, call it this bulb, this cork-like knot at the top, okay, mikabel tuma. It is such that it's a valid utensil and it's susceptible to tuma. Ve'im lav, and if not, ein mikabel tuma. It does not. It's not susceptible to tuma. Bein kach uvein kach nital b'Shabbat. But regardless of whether it has one or not, this cork or bulb at the top, it may be handled on Shabbat. Amai, asks the Gemara, why is that the case? Pshute Kli Eitu. Okay, so the Gemara says it's basically a wooden instrument, a wooden utensil, right? Upshute Kli Eitz, in regard to most wooden utensils, Einan Mekablim Tuma. We say they do not, are not susceptible to Tuma. My Tama, what's the reasoning? Okay, Dumia Desak Ba'ina. Okay, we say that for a utensil to become susceptible to Tuma, it has to be similar to a sack. Okay, now what we might, in other words, point out is that the sack is able to hold items. So in other words, it has to have a receptacle, what's called a kibul, okay, like a bowl, okay? That's the point, right? Tana Mishmed Rabbi Nechemia, and it's taught in the name of Rabbi Nechemia, B'sha'a shemahafech b'zeitim, hafcho v'ro'ebo. Okay, and Rabbi is saying, according to Rabbi Nechemia, that when he turns the olives, right, with this utensil, he's able to look at it, okay, and in looking at it, okay, the oil goes up into this tube, into the reed, okay, and therefore, if that's the case, you're able to see it in this bulb area, and that is what makes this a utensil subject to potential tumor. Okay, new Mishnah again. Back to Matniten, our Mishnah says, Rabbi Yossi Omer, says Rabbi Yossi, Kol HaKelim Nitalim, all kinds of utensils, okay, may be handled on Shabbat, Chutz min Hamasar Hagadol, with the exception of a very large saw, Viated Shamachrisha, or the blade of a plow. Gemara. Amar Rav Nachman, Hai Uchla de Katzre. Okay, he's suggesting another example. Okay, and this is, I guess we would call it a, let's put it this way, I'll call it a perforated tub. Okay, it was a utensil that was used by launderers. Either they would hold the tub over the laundry to be able to put water on it, or they would use spices underneath the tub and allow the spices to fragrant the clothing that would be on top, right? Kiated shel machrisha damya. So Rav Nachman considers this laundering utensil, this launderer's sprinkler, if you will, perforated tub, a special kind of utensil, and as a result, okay, it could be ruined if used for other purposes, and therefore should not be, it would be muktzah on Shabbat, just like the blade of a plow. Okay. Amar Abai, so Abai comes up with another example. Charva de ushkafe. Okay, he says that what about the blade of a tanner? Visakina de ishkavta. Or what about the knife of a butcher? Vichatsina de nagarai. Or what about the aids, okay, which is another utensil of a carpenter? Okay, all of these are apparently, remember, utensils that are particularly significant in that profession, and therefore if they get used for other purposes, they could get damaged. And so therefore, since the professional is concerned that they not get damaged, okay, he sets them aside. They are therefore considered muktzah and therefore not usable on Shabbat. Ki yated shel machrisha dami. So that would be muktzah based on potential financial loss, and therefore they would be, according to Abaye, similar to the blade of the plow, right? Tanu Rabbanan, originally, says the Braita, right? Varishona, Hayu Omrim Shlosha Kelim Nitalin B'Shabbat. The rabbis originally said that there were 3 kinds of utensils that could be used on Shabbat. 1, Mikzoa Shel Dvela, a certain kind of knife to be able to cut fig. Remember they had fig cakes. Vizohama Listarin Shel Kadera. And the second was a particular kind of ladle, okay, which was used to clean out and ladle out items from a pot. This particular utensil, by the way, was unique in its shape in that it had a fork at one end and a spoon at the other end. Okay, so in one hand, let's say you were serving, stew, you could ladle it out with the stew, with the soup, with the spoon end, and then get the pieces of meat out with the other end. So anyway, and the third example, v'sakin ktana she'al gabe shulchan, and the other is a normal small knife that you would use to set the table when people were eating. Okay? Hitiru, they permitted. V'chazru v'hitiru, then they went back and permitted. V'chazru v'hitiru, then they went back and permitted. Ad she'amru kol hakelim nitalin b'Shabbat, until they said, the sages, all utensils may be handled on Shabbat, chutz min hamastar hagadol, with the exception of a large saw, v'yated shel machrisha, or a plow, a blade of a plow. So the Gemara now is going to ask about this statement, this Braita. Mai hitiru v'chazru v'hitiru v'chazru v'hitiru. What does it mean when it says they permitted, went back and permitted, and went back and permitted? Amar Abaye, Abaye's suggested answer, hitiru devar shemalachto laheter. They permitted an object whose method of use would be permitted, letzorach gufo, for its own general purpose. V'chazru v'hitiru, and then they went back and permitted davar shemalachto leheter letzorach mekomo, that they permitted then handling an object where it was, in other words, where one needed to move the object because you needed its place. V'chazru v'hitiru, then they went back and permitted again davar shemalachto le'isur, a object, a utensil, where that kind of normal work is forbidden. However, letzorach gufo ein, but for using it for its general normal purpose, yes. Letzorach mekomo, lo. But for simply moving it for the need of its location, for other purposes, no. Va'adayan biyado echat ein, and this was still so long as one could move it, handle it with one hand. V'shtei yadav lo, but with 2 hands, no. Ad she'amru, until the fact that the sages said, kol hakelim nitalin b'Shabbat All utensils may be handled on Shabbat, va'afilu b'shtei yadayim, even if it needs two hands. Now, Amar le Rava. So Rava responds to Abaye's explanation. Michdei hitiru katani, since it says they permitted it in the Braita, mali litzorech gufo. What reason do we have to say that it had to do with its general usage? Mali litzorech mekomo. What reason did you have to bring in that it had to be for the question of needing the place? Ela amar Rava. Rather, Rava is going to give an alternative explanation. Hitiru davar shemalachto leheter. They permitted an object that's use, is permitted. Bein litzorach gufo uvein litzorach makomo. Regardless of whether you needed it for its general purpose or if you needed its place. V'chazru v'hitiru mechama letzeil. And then they went back and permitted moving the object simply from the sun to the shade. In other words, permission to move handle the object on Shabbat so that the item wouldn't get ruined. V'chazru v'hitiru, and then they went back and permitted again. Davar shemalachto le'isur. Okay, an object that its normal use would have been forbidden on Shabbat, letzorach gufo uletzorach makomo. Okay, allowing its general use, its use for itself, its general use to be acceptable, or its need for its place. And yes, mechama letzeil lo, but simply to move it so it might not get ruined from shade, from sun to shade, no. Va'adayin ba'adam echad, and still we're talking about one person being able to move it. B'shnei b'nei adam lo, but if it were to take two people, we would say no. Ad sh'amru, until the sages then decided and said, Kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbat, all utensils may be handled on Shabbat, afilu b'shnei b'nei adam, even if it's required by two people. Eti ve'abaye. Abaye wasn't happy and challenged Rava with the following Braita. Meducha. We talked about a mortar, right? Im yesh bashum. Excuse me. If it has garlic in it, metaltalinota. We say it can be handled. Ve'im lav, and if not, ein metaltalinota. We cannot handle or move it. Hacha b'may yaskinin. What are we talking about? Mechama letzeil, responds Rava. That refers simply to moving it from the sun to the shade. Etive. So Abaye challenges him again. V'shavin, and we all say, she'im katsav alav basar, that if somebody used the pestle from the mortar, okay, in order to help cut meat, right? She'asur l'taltalah, that it's forbidden to handle it. Hachanami mechama letzeil. So here too, again, says Rava, we're talking a situation moving something simply from the sun to the shade. Amar Rav Chanina, says Rav Chanina, B'yamei Nehemiah ben Hilkiah, in the time of Nehemiah. Okay, think of the book Ezra and Nehemiah. That's the Nehemiah we're referring to. Nishneit Mishnah Zo. That's when this Mishnah was originally taught. Dichtiv. Why? Because it says in the book of Nehemiah, B'yamim hachama. Okay, and he says when he came to Eretz Yisrael, remember, from Bavel, in the summer months, Ra'iti b'Yehuda I used to see in Judah, in other words, the northern area of Israel, right? Dorchim gatot b'Shabbat, that they would actually stamp on, treading on wine presses on Shabbat. Umavi'in ha'arimot, and they would also bring in sheaves of grain on Shabbat. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Karnanim umaklot glustara umeducha. So, in other words, implying that this idea of permitting and then permitting and permitting, originally, in other words, there were strict limitations, and then eventually, as the people showed their observance of Shabbat improved, Chazal was able to become a little more lenient. Okay, now, Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, Kanin, we have certain kinds of, let's call them rods, okay? These were the golden rods that were used for the showbread, that they would stick into the holder to separate the loaves on Shabbat, right? Umaklot, and then we have poles, okay? These were wooden poles that they used to carry the Korban Pesach, and where they would hang the animal from these wooden poles, even on Shabbat, the question, okay, in order to flay the skin off the end. Glustera, okay, the glustera is I guess I would try to explain it this way. In olden times, to close a door, right, you had like a bar that would be put behind the door to lock it, to close it. So one end of the bar, okay, was thicker than the other end of the bar, okay? Maybe that was the end that, okay, or sometimes it was attached to the house and then it would just slide down. Other times, I think they would have to lift the whole thing and put it into so one end, in any case, the glustera was the thicker end of this door bolt, we'll call it, okay? Umeducha, and we said a mortar. Kulan kodem hatarat kelim nishnu. I said all the laws, says Rabbi Eliezer, dealing with these items were before the rabbis gave their general permission about utensils. Kanim, these rods, right? Ditznan, as was taught in the Mishnah, lo sidur hakanim v'lo netilatan, dochet haShabbat, that not the arrangement of putting in the rods for the showbread or removing them would be such that it would be doche Shabbos. Makelot, these poles, right? Ditznan, as taught elsewhere in a Mishnah. Makalot, dikim, chalakim, okay, that they had these poles that were, I guess I would say, sharpened, okay, right, and they were smooth, and right, and they used to put them through the Korban Pesach, umanicho al ktefo, and then two people would carry the Korban Pesach using the poles, va'al katef chavero, and then so one was on one fellow's shoulder, the pole, and one was on the other fellow's shoulder, v'toleh umafshit, and then they would hang the Korban Pesach, and they would flay it. Amar Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, says as follows, Arba'a asar shechal liot b'Shabbat, okay? He's saying, wait a second, that we have a situation on Shabbat where if the 14th of Nisan came out on Shabbat, and one needed to prepare the Korban Pesach, instead, maniach yado al katef chavero, that instead of using these poles, one fellow would put his arm hand on the other fellow's shoulder, viad chavero al katefo, and the other fellow would put his arm on his friend's, v'toleh umafshit, and then they would lay the Korban Pesach over their arms, and with their free hand, that's how they would flay the animal. Okay, and now we'll get ready to finish up. Glustera, we said that was the thick end of the door bolt. Ditnan, as it was taught, Nagar, sheyesh barasho glustera. Okay, this this board, or this beam, or this bolt, okay, that has at one end this thicker piece. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Shumta min petach zeh v'toleh b'chavero b'Shabbat. Okay, according to Rabbi Yeshua, one could drag it, okay, to the doorway and then hang it, okay, right, and hang it there on the Sabbath. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Harehu kekol hakelim umetaltel v'chatzer. And Rabbi Tarfon said it's like any other kind of utensil, and it can be handled in a courtyard. Okay, and we'll stop right there, and then pick up with the rest and finish the Mishnah tomorrow. This particular section, and we'll start with a new Mishnah tomorrow. Okay. All right. So everybody have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Stay well, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Get out of here. Goodbye.